December 7th, 1941. It's a date we all know. It was a surprise attack in the Pacific, and its goal was simple: cripple a nation. But it did the exact opposite. It created a superpower. So today, let's get into how one of the most brilliant military strikes in history actually turned out to be one of its greatest strategic blunders.
You know, the crazy thing is, the guy who planned the whole attack, Admiral Yamamoto, he kind of saw it coming. These are his words, and they're pretty chilling. He knew something his bosses didn't seem to get. You just don't poke a sleeping giant. It really shows you what an incredible high-stakes gamble this whole thing was for Japan.
Okay, so to really get why Pearl Harbor was such a bombshell, you have to picture what America was like back in 1941. The country was officially neutral, but it was more than that. It was deeply isolationist. I mean, people were dead set on staying out of the wars that were tearing Europe and Asia apart. The vast majority of Americans just wanted nothing to do with it. And then, in the span of just a couple of hours, everything changed.
And the first hit, the most devastating one, was the human cost. The attack was so fast, so brutal, it left thousands of service members and civilians dead. A number like that, it's not just a statistic, right? It was a gut punch to the entire country, a deep shock to the system.
And from a military perspective, the blow was absolutely staggering. We're talking about the heart of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. All those mighty battleships, either at the bottom of the harbor or completely crippled. From Japan's point of view, they had just delivered the perfect knockout punch. They thought they had taken America right out of the fight in the Pacific.
The shift in public opinion was just as dramatic, maybe even more so. I mean, look at this. Before the attack, you had 88% of Americans saying no way to war. That is a solid wall of opposition. But after, that wall just crumbled overnight. Suddenly, you have 97% of the country demanding war. A nation that was totally divided on the issue was now suddenly completely united.
And this is the phrase that perfectly captured that feeling. When President Roosevelt spoke to Congress the very next day, he wasn't just asking to go to war. He was taking all that national outrage, all that new resolve, and pouring it into 4 words that no one would ever forget. The days of sitting on the sidelines, they were over. But the attack did more than just point the country at a foreign enemy. It unleashed some really powerful forces right here at home. Some of them were noble, for sure, but others, well, they would leave a dark stain on American history. You saw this huge wave of patriotism just sweep across the nation. Remember Pearl Harbor? That wasn't just a slogan. It became the rally cry for the entire war. And the message was crystal clear. Every single citizen, united, all working for one thing: victory.
But here's the tough question. Who got left out of that unity? Because that powerful surge had a really dark side, one that was fueled by a whole lot of fear and suspicion. And that fear, tragically, got turned inward, against fellow Americans.
This led to one of the most troubling chapters of the entire war. The government rounded up over 130,000 people and forced them from their homes into internment camps. We're talking about Japanese Americans, German Americans, and Italian Americans. And here's the kicker: many of them were full-blown U.S. citizens. It was a moment where fear completely overran civil liberties, targeting entire communities just because of where their ancestors came from. So while the nation was struggling with all of this at home, something else was happening. A totally different and arguably more powerful transformation was taking off. An industrial revolution was about to be unleashed. And this right here, is what would ultimately decide who won the war.
See, Roosevelt understood something critical. He knew that winning a modern war wasn't just about having soldiers on the front line. It was about having the supplies to back them up. So he threw down a challenge to the American people: become the arsenal of democracy. And boy, did the nation respond, on a scale the world had literally never seen before.
It's honestly hard to wrap your head around the scale of this transformation. Think about it. In 1939, the U.S. military was ranked 18th in the world, smaller than Romania's. Can you believe that? And just 6 years later, it was the single most powerful military force on the entire planet. That's not just growth, that is a complete reinvention from the ground up.
And this reinvention? It happened in factories all across the country. You had Chrysler plants that one day were making family cars, and the next they're churning out Sherman tanks. Assembly lines that built refrigerators were suddenly being retooled to make aircraft engines. It was like the entire industrial might of America just turned on a dime, with incredible speed, all focused on one single goal:
win the war. And the numbers, they're just mind-boggling. Take a look at this. By 1944, the U.S. was building more planes than Germany and Japan put together. Hitler had once laughed at America's ability to produce things. Well, these numbers prove just how catastrophically wrong he was.
The total output was just an avalanche of military hardware. Over the course of the war, American factories pumped out 300,000 airplanes, 2.6 million machine guns, not to mention tens of billions of bullets. It was just this overwhelming flood of ships and tanks and trucks, a volume that the Axis powers simply had no way of ever matching.
But let's be clear, this production miracle wasn't really a miracle. It was built on the sweat, the sacrifice, and the sheer exhaustion of millions of ordinary Americans. Listen to this quote from a shipyard foreman. It gives you a real sense of that relentless, nonstop pace on the home front. It truly was a total war effort.
And this all brings us back to the central irony of the whole story. The attack on Pearl Harbor, tactically, it was a masterpiece, a brilliant military operation. But strategically, it was an absolute catastrophe for Japan. They won the battle, for sure, but in doing so, they basically guaranteed they were going to lose the war. So let's break down why. Because for all the ships they sank, it's what the Japanese didn't hit that ended up being just as important. First off, the American aircraft carriers, the future of naval combat, they weren't even in port. They were all out at sea and completely escaped the attack. Then there were the naval repair yards, the submarine base, and maybe most importantly, the massive oil tank farms, all untouched. And what that meant was the U.S. Navy could patch itself up, refuel, and get back into the fight way, way faster than Japan ever thought possible. And some people understood this strategic reality immediately. Take Winston Churchill. When he heard the news, he wasn't dismayed at all. He was relieved. He knew that with America's industrial power now fully in the fight, an Allied victory had just gone from being a hope to being an inevitability. And that right there is the ultimate paradox of Pearl Harbor. Japan launched an attack that was designed to knock America out of the war, but what it really did was knock America into its future role as a global superpower. It wasn't the end of the story for the U.S. and the Pacific. It was chapter 1. And it leaves us with that timeless, powerful lesson. Be very, very careful about waking a sleeping giant.